Some of you know, and some of you maybe don't know, that for about 20 years, the rabbis of Boulder have got together on the night of Shavuot and collaborated on a program of learning and singing and prayer. And it's been a popular event, especially because people in Boulder so value the collaboration that we do across communities. And I've been so grateful for that in the years that I have been here as rabbi of Bonei Shalom. This year, for obvious reasons, we're not going to be gathering in the same way. Bonei Shalom, my congregation, was due to be hosting this event. If Times had cooperated with us in a different way, and we would have all gathered there on Thursday night, which is when Shavuot actually begins. But we got together and decided that today is actually Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is the new moon of the month of Sivan that leads us into this powerful holiday of Shavuot, where we imagine ourselves receiving the Torah. And we decided to do a panel today, which is one of the hallmarks of our Chaver get-togethers. There's always a panel. It's usually around 10 o'clock at night on the night of Shavuot, where different rabbis share, you know, what is touching them, what's alive for them around a particular theme. So we decided to do that, and then we thought, well, wouldn't it be great to increase the collaboration, not between the rabbis and the communities and organizations, but also to include our wonderful Boulder JCC. And so we texted Jonathan Lev and said, would you be willing to collaborate with us and moderate the panel? And he immediately replied and said, I'd be honored to and love to. And so here we are. And it's just, I wanted to just say that I feel so grateful to all of my colleagues, of course, but also to Jonathan and to the JCC. During these really, really difficult times, there have been all kinds of ways in which we've stayed together, we've stayed connected, we've deepened relationships in some cases, even though we're physically distanced from one another. So I wanted to really thank Jonathan and Nancy Lipsey and everybody at the Boulder JCC for making this possible. And also on behalf of Chaver, I wanted to thank our wonderful administrator Stacy Rosenbaum, who has helped us put this program together as well. So that's it from me. It's now my real great pleasure to introduce someone who doesn't need much introduction, the wonderful executive director of our Boulder JCC, Jonathan Lev.
Thank you, Rabbi Mark. It's so great to have everyone here tonight. We're really happy to be able to host and partner with Chaver, and especially all of the different clergy and spiritual leaders in our community to bring this webinar to you today. We hope that everyone will be able to join all of the different programs happening at all the different congregations. Those are listed on the JCC website, so feel free to take a look there or on the different congregation websites. We'll talk more about that later. Just to let everyone know, we just announced that we will be reopening for our Early Childhood Center Summer Camp and Cherryville Day Camp as of June 1st and June 8th. We have a few spots available in each left. So if people have friends or families that want to connect and want to come this summer, we're doing it in a very limited and modified fashion, but it will exist this summer. We also want to know that we're here as the JCC to be able to support the entire community. If there's something that you need, or you're having something where you have a community need, connect with us, connect with me or Nancy Lipsey, who's on this call, and we can help connect the dots to be able to help make sure that those things are happening in our community. There's a lot of different ways that we can gather together at this time virtually, and there are a lot of ways that we can help support each other even though we're physically distant. So we want to continue to do those. So today you're going to be joining this, it is a webinar. A webinar is different than a Zoom meeting, and you may not be used to this. So all participants are muted already and have no ability to share your video, but that doesn't mean it's not interactive. So the way you interact is you actually, if you have a question, you're going to go to the Q&A section and you're going to click on it, ask your question. If you have a question that's for a particular person, please make sure that you put their name in the question, because we may not be answering the questions right when you ask them. So make sure that that's there. If you have technical issues at all, please send those in the chat feature and we'll try to help you with that. So today our panelists are going to share their stories, their personal stories, and ideas of how Torah and Jewish practice have helped them through different challenging times. We hope their stories will be an inspiration and be able to guide us through this time. If you have questions, again, please make sure you ask them and we'll get to them at the end. We're going to have, the format is each panelist is going to speak for 5 minutes about their own personal story. And then afterwards, we're going to be open for Q&A. So let me introduce you to all the different panelists. It's a bunch of esteemed rabbis and spiritual leaders in our community who I have the honor to be on this call with. So Rabbi Ruth Eaglefarb, she is an adjunct rabbi of Congregation Har Hashem and is passionate about social justice, teaching, Jewish spirituality, and making connections with world Jewry. She was ordained by Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, where she was also commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Navy. Additionally, Rabbi Ruthie is certified through the Institute for Jewish Spirituality in Jewish mindfulness and meditation practice. And if you haven't had a chance to check out her teachings in that, you should. The next is Rabbi Jamie Korngold from Adventure Judaism. Rabbi Jamie Korngold is the current president of Haver and senior rabbi and lead guide of Adventure Judaism, a nature-based approach to Judaism that bridges the gap between scientific thought and religion. Rabbi Jamie received her ordination from Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion and an undergraduate degree in forestry from Cornell University. She's the author of 11 books. And again, if you haven't checked out those 11 books or you want to be inspired during this time to check out, many of them are available through PJ Library, but are also available through the libraries in our community. The next is Mora Yehudis Fishman, who almost needs no introduction, but Mora Yehudis Fishman is recognized and respected as one of Boulder's leading teachers of Torah and Hasidic philosophy. She spent 6 years as the spiritual director of Congregation Eish Kodesh in Boulder and more than 50 years teaching in the community. Her qualities of erudition, relevance, sensitivity, and humor endear her to a broad spectrum of multi-generational students, me being one of them. Rabbi Sarah Bracha Gershuni of Neve Kodesh, inspired by a vision of spiritually enriching, future-oriented, egalitarian Judaism, Rabbi Sarah Bracha Gershuni was ordained as a rabbi in 2012 by Hebrew College. She also holds a master's degree in Jewish education. Rabbi Bracha became the spiritual leader of Boulder's Renewal Congregation, Neve Kodesh, in 2014. The same year, she was also ordained as a Kohenet Hebrew priestess. She will be ending her pulpit at that position at the end of this month, but will continue to be with us in Boulder. And lastly, Rabbi Marklloway from Bonei Shalom. Rabbi Marklloway has been the rabbi at Bonei Shalom for 16 years. He was ordained at the Ziegler School for Rabbinic Studies at the American Jewish University in Los Angeles. His rabbinic training spanned 6 years in 3 cities, London, Jerusalem, and Los Angeles. He practiced complementary medicine, including massage and craniosacral therapy, and performed as a professional actor in London. A big proponent of environmental action and social justice, Rabbi Mark is actively involved in local and national faith-based organizations. So now you've met all of our panelists. You can see why they're so incredible. And I want to talk about today's theme. So the theme for the program is how light or teachings of the Torah can guide or inspire us during challenging times. Right now, we're in one of those challenging times, and we're all in it together. At a time when usually our clergy and community leaders are a source of strength, they're also in it with us, caring for their own families and friends. They're also facing illness while caring for our community members and working to support spiritual and physical needs without the usual tools. No ability to hold a hand, visit the sick in person, sit with someone in person for Shiva, learn and pray together in person for Shabbat, yet they're leading us with grace, love, compassion, and using new methods to connect with all of us. I'm inspired every day by the work that's happening in our community to continue to connect all that we're doing with the Jewish community and broader national and world community. Our tradition conceives of Torah both as a source of teaching that guides our lives, as well as a source of spiritual illumination that enlightens us. As Proverbs declares, a mitzvah is a candle, and Torah the light. So with that, I would love to open up to our panelists and begin with Rabbi Ruth Eaglefarb to share her story.
Shalom. It's wonderful to be here this afternoon with you all. And since we're virtual, one of the things that I like to do is to send a little love through the heart and to send a little hug as needed, which is one of the things that we are doing more of these days. I had just a couple of things that I wanted to share. And one of them was actually immediately through a let's see if it's, oh, nope, sorry, folks. For me, one of the purposes of Torah is that it is a guide to how I may live my life, and it's a guide that's actually relevant and useful in the today. And for me in particular, I would say that I have felt that by connecting to the Jewish tradition, I've been given wisdom on how to become a better person, the best person I might be. And that has been through the extensive practice of tikkun midot, or musar work, which I've been dedicated to now for quite a few years in working and teaching about. Another area that for me has been critical in my Jewish practice is around social justice and tzedek tirdof, the notion that we would be inspired to engage in acts of justice, has moved me not only as a rabbi, but also when I was a young person in college to work with the Migrant Farm Workers Division of Legal Aid and to represent the rights of migrant farm workers, as well as to do work around human rights issues in Argentina during the time of the disappeared back in the mid to late 80s. Part of that, though, even when I was afraid, was because Judaism and our tradition encouraged us and encourages us to do that. So I wanted to share now the screen that I couldn't do just a moment ago, so forgive me. Can you see this? Yes, right? Great. And I had this image of somebody saying, what would you say if I told you there's a way to fit all of that on just one tablet? And the reason why I love this is it suggests that when we talk about Torah, it's something that's evolving and changing over time. And for me, part of that change is represented by the tablets, by a scroll, by a book, and actually by a tablet. And that, for me, represents something that the rabbi from Chernobyl, Rabbi, shared, which is the Torah is eternal and relevant in every time, because if it were not the case, then it would just be stories from a time past. And if this were so, why would it be referred to as Torah, which is an expression of teaching? And I believe that the Torah and its lessons and its guiding and its instruction is eternal because it's adaptable rather than because of some unchanging nature that it has. And I also believe that the wisdom of Jewish wisdom is that it's not just bound by the past, but it continues through a chain of transmission that goes from one generation to the next. And it's in that sense of it being alive and changing and evolving that helps me to constantly turn to Torah as a guide and as a teacher. And for me, that's represented in part by how it changes its form in this way, but at the same time, the content is evolving to make itself meaningful in the current day. So that's all I wanted to share right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Ruthie. We appreciate your wisdom and guidance and thoughts of the evolution of Torah and also its relevance at all times. So thank you for sharing. I'm sure we will have some questions for you at the end. Next, we're going to move to Rabbi Jamie Korngold.
Hello. So the piece of Torah that I find to be sustaining in difficult times like this is the way we read Torah. So we read Torah every single week. If it's a good week, we read Torah. If it's a bad week, we read Torah. People all over the world read Torah. And so for me, this is something that's been really helpful in taking me out of what's happening today or tomorrow or this week or this month or even this year, and just into the really much larger picture of continuity and sustainability. So personally, the Torah teachings that I've really been grappling with at this particular time have to do with the stories of the creation stories and what Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik named the Adam 1 story and the Adam 2 story. So we all know there's two creation stories, and there's two very different characters in each of those. And I believe that we have a little bit of each of those in us, and I'm finding a lot of tension between them. So the Adam 1 story, in Adam 1, we have the total CEO startup guy, where God's like, look, here's the deal, Adam. We're going to start this venture. We're going to call it Earth. And I'm giving you some venture capital. You're going to have animals. You're going to have fish. You're going to have plants. And the goal is to multiply it, make it plentiful and numerous and fruitful. So you got to expand. You got to grow. We need a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. And listen, in Midrash Ecclesiastes, God furthers it and says, look, if you mess this up, there's not going to be anyone else to fix it. So it's all on you, dude. You better get this thing going, right? So that's a really important part of my rabbinate and what I do. And it also has a lot of tension with the Adam 2 story. So Adam 2 is a totally different character, right? Adam 1, the entire earth was created first, like, as the Midrash says, as a king, a banquet laid out for a king, and then Adam arrives. Adam 2 is totally different. Adam 2 is put on the earth, and then God finds helpers for Adam 2 and brings forth all the animals to be in partnership. And I skipped the most important piece too. So Adam is made from the earth, the Adamah. So immediately we have this connection between earth and man. And then the animals are helpers. And then Eve comes straight from Adam and they're helpmates. And their job is to Shomrei Adamah, to guard the earth, to till and to tend it. So it's a totally different model. And this is the part of my life that, you know, I'm taking care of my father who's up at Manor Care. I'm taking care of my kids. I do my best to take care of my students and their families, very much in this partnership sort of way. And I love that aspect. And yet I also feel such a tension between this other aspect, the Adam 1. So I was born in 1965. And what I love to say that in 1970, the exclamation points became on the keyboard, right? And that's like the harbinger of Instagram in my mind. Right. So we have the exclamation point saying, hello, I'm here. Look at me. Right. And that is what our culture has become. Right. And I'm part of this. I own this. I totally am part of this. I started my own congregation 20 years ago. But this is the whole Instagram and Facebook and self-promotion. And it's a little crass and it's a little ugly, and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. And I've been in so many conversations with different agencies and people during this COVID thing of trying to figure out how the Jewish community is going to look on the other side. And I see this raw tension between these two forces of what are we going to look like? Are we going to look like Adam 1 or are we going to look like Adam 2? So internally, as well as professionally, this is the real rubbing spot that I am experiencing right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think we're all feeling that for sure. I know I am. And one of the great things about this community is the fact that we're all sitting here together sort of in one panel and one group, and our leaders of different organizations in different communities within the same community and can work together. So there's some power to that, but there's also some great tension of this idea of self promotion and also making sure that you're sustaining through something like this. So that makes sense. And thank you for sharing. We're going to come back to that. Next, we are blessed to be able to hear from Maura Yehudis Fishman.
Hi, everyone. First of all, greetings to all the Chaver members who weren't able to be here today. And so you should know we're all in this together. So I wrote a few things down because since I think I'm older than all of you, not put together, but I'm old enough to be your mother on some level, I wanted to highlight a few points of my life where I felt that the Torah was guiding me. So I started by saying, when was the Torah not my guide? As early as I can remember, when I was an only child with two handicapped parents, one deaf and the other crippled, I must have cried a lot because no one came for me for quite a while. My father couldn't hear me, and my mother took a while to get to me. But in the interim, in that empty time and space, I think I found something called God. I had no idea what he looked like, but my mother used to read Heidi to me so often every night that I knew it by heart. And in kindergarten, they wanted to put me in the first grade when I brought the book in and started reading it. But at closer look, they saw I was holding it upside down. So they kept me in kindergarten. Still, it gave me a sense that God must have been a lot like grandfather in the Heidi story. Or maybe even my grandfather, whom I never knew, but whom I was named after. Later in school, I found that God wrote a book called the Torah and gave it to the Jewish people. Of course, I wanted to read that book of the one who got me through infancy. And actually, since I learned later that we all learned the Torah 9 months before we're even born. And just as I learned today, God is obligated to teach us Torah, just as we are obligated to teach our children. So I immersed myself with gusto, but I guess because of my Heidi background, I love literature too, and I always try to relate it to Torah, sometimes even in a mystical way. For example, when I used to watch cartoons as a kid, I watched the cartoon of Felix the cat, and when he got stuck in any jam, he would pull out his magic chalk and draw a window or a door and get out. So I figured maybe the Torah can be my magic chalk throughout life. And indeed, I think it really was. Then I would listen over and over to a movie, a story called Johnny Appleseed. And I would get planted in my mind the idea of trying to plant seeds of Torah in other people as I got older. And in fact, even the song turned out to be a prophecy for me. Get on the wagon rolling west, out to the great unknown, get on the wagon rolling west, so you'll be left alone. So that's why I'm here and not on the East Coast. Not that's why, but one of the reasons. And it didn't hurt that Johnny Appleseed was a preacher, John Chapman. When I discovered Kabbalah in the 7th grade, sneaking into a forbidden room in the West End Library in Boston, the light went on for me in Torah in a more complete way. As above, so below, as below, so above, that became my life's scaffolding. What else was there in existence that had any permanence or security to it, for me at least? The puzzle pieces seemed to fit together the whole cosmos. And later, when I might have been in danger of looking too deeply into the clouds, along came the Baal Shem Tov and his followers, reminding me that what God really desires is a dira batachtonim, a dwelling place in the lowest worlds, or as I like to call it, a garden apartment. Throughout the dark moments of my life, when first my father and mother died, I felt I had only Torah to hold on to in a most permanent way. As we will soon read before Rosh Hashanah, before the new year, Ki avi ve'imi azavuni, when my father and mother abandoned me, Hashem yasfeni, God gathers me in. And indeed, I literally took that to heart in my life. Of course, I had many rabbis and teachers guiding me, but my models have always been people who both maintained very high ethical standards and were also able to rise above nature. And of course, many Hasidic Rebbes filled that bill. I just read recently a story about the Rizhiner Rebbe who had a golden carriage to drive in. And one time he stopped on the road and he saw a rock on the side of the road, and he picked up the rock and he moved it. He wasn't in his way, but he just moved it to another side. And he said, this rock has been on this side long enough. It's asking me to put it on the other side. So, you know, like, how do you go wrong with characters like that who can talk to rocks? Also, personally, the Torah has provided me a balance between polarities. When I was in college, my favorite book was a little book called Language and Thought and Action by S.I. Hayakawa. And he posited that nothing is really opposites, but rather kind of poles on a spectrum. And I think, yeah, that seems to be what Torah is talking about. And that's why the Maharal, we just learned in Rabbi Mark's Talmud class, the Torah is given in this month, which is the third month of the year, because it kind of balances a synthesis, what's the term? Well, it synthesizes opposites, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So yes, for me, that's exactly what Torah provides, a balance in life. And without it, who knows, I might have become a nun or a prostitute or some extreme thing like that. But Torah is really my guiding, my not just my guiding light, but my anchor, my balance between heaven and earth.
Ori Hudis,
Yes.
I'm gonna move us to the next panelist, unless you have something else that you want to finish on.
Sorry about that. See, I told you I've lived a long time. So just one more idea that, you know, we all make mistakes in life, and how do we get through those mistakes? So there's a teaching that if your master is with you, then even if you break something on the way, the master takes all kind of the burden of the mistake on the master's shoulders. So that's my kind of motto. I say, oh, but God, you're here. You'll take care of it. So that's my story.
Thank you very much. I think we're hearing a general theme here of the way in which Torah has really impacted each of the different people who are on this call, and the way in which it's helping us through this time. So we are now going to move to Rabbi Sarah Bracha Gershuni.
So I'll pick up where Murray Yehudis left off a little bit in speaking about the Torah as a magic chalk that can get you where you need to go in life. Because I think for me, really, Torah also is that mitzvah. So I want to investigate a little bit this amazing verse that we're using as our jumping off point, which is the verse from the book of Proverbs. It says, Ner mitzvah, b'Torah or. The candle, mitzvah is the candle, and Torah is the light. Which is actually a little strange when you come to think about that image a little bit more. It's saying the mitzvah is the physical element, and Torah is the energy that's produced by that. So if Torah is the light that's produced by doing mitzvot, then what exactly do we mean by Torah? Because it's clearly something more primordial or energetic than a written text. And we find similarly in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says something like, if there's no Torah, there's no derech eretz, there's no being a mensch in the world, there's no good society. And if there's no derech eretz, there's no Torah. The two are mutually interdependent. So it seems like Torah is like a social good that's produced by doing mitzvot, by living by the mitzvot, by a life of right action. So for me, perhaps this image, one way to think about it is maybe you could say that the mitzvah is like a scented candle. And when you light it, then the scent that infuses the space, that's the Torah. It's the luminescence, but it's also the particular character or flavor that's released by that fills the space and permeates the senses of those who are around it. Now, this also connects with the idea that ner, the word ner, the Hasidim take to be an acronym for Nefesh and Ruach. It stands for Nefesh and Ruach, Nun Resh. Nefesh is the most physical life force level of the soul, and Ruach is like the emotional body, the inspirational body. So we could say that when they're working in harmony with one another, our elemental life force and our higher circuitry, our emotional functioning, that can be activated to produce this permeating sense of Torah. Which also then raises for me the question of what is the wick? Now you could say the word wick, betil, reminds us of the blue thread of the tzitzit. It's that word, but it also means a twining, like the word naftali. It means something woven or twisted together. And I can't help but think, when I have that image of the wick, of the double helix of our DNA, which is precisely our nefesh and our ruach intertwining to make us grounded in this earth plane. So you could say that the human being is the wick, our nefesh ruach self is the wick, the mitzvah is the fuel, and Torah is the energy that's released. And of course, fire is our most primordial, one of our most primordial signs of that transformation of matter into energy. So where is the light produced? Where is that Torah that's produced? Where does it go? Well, we could say that it's lighting up some other dimension on a cosmic level. Perhaps when we're doing mitzvot, it's making rectifications, tikkunim, that's illuminating, that's giving energy to the creator. And it's also presumably bringing that into our lives too. And it's in a subtle sense, it's not necessarily obviously a physical light. To make it personal for just a minute, I would say that the mitzvot which have the most profound effect in that way for me, the ones that bring that light of sustenance into my life, are the ones that help to regulate time. So of course, Shabbat, which allows us to sanctify time and celebrate time, has been an incredibly important practice, particularly in this time of quarantine, where many people have said, oh, we're losing track of a sense of time, everything's become all one, all meaningless. I've actually found that Shabbat has given me and my household a rhythm that's consistent. And as someone was saying before, in fact, the whole point about practice is it can actually stay consistent whatever the circumstances are. It creates a deeper baseline than I'm having a hard time or I'm having an easy time right now. Which I'll share just one more word, Jonathan, if I have a minute, which is, I believe it's Viktor Frankl, but I could be wrong, who talks about the way that in the camps, for some people at any rate, having a practice, having a consistency of regularity of rhythm of self actually helped them survive, at least psychologically, in horrific conditions, to still be able to sanctify food, to wash hands before even a tiny morsel of bread, to have the same practices of the same prayers and the same rhythm was incredibly sustaining while everything else changes around you, to have that consistency of self that is forms a deeper fundamental level of reality that's deeper than whatever the presenting circumstances seem to be, even when those change very, very radically. So one final word on that, since we're in this period of sanctifying time, this Sfirat HaOmer, we're in a 49-stage process. The sages say of not just counting, Sefirah could mean counting, but the word Sfirah is also the same as the word sapphire. It means a jewel. So the whole purpose of this counting of time and making conscious our relationship in time with time is a process of self-rectification, purification, clarification, of lighting things up, of bringing this Torah or into our lived reality through all of the mitzvot that we do, and in particular the mitzvot that are particular to this moment of Sefirat HaOmer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From my qualitative research that I've done in Boulder recently, I think more people are making challah at home for the first time almost ever for some people. And also more people are engaging in some form of Shabbat activity. So it's a really interesting time, and this goes back to, in some ways, you know, what are the things and values we're gaining during this time that we want to bring forth in our sort of growth experience. And so thank you for sharing the idea of time and the idea of that repetition and coming through a regulation of having Shabbat. So thank you very much. I want to remind everyone that questions are open. So please feel free, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. We have a number of questions that we have collected from before, which we'll go into. But if you have something, please feel free to do that as we're going into our final panelists, and then we'll open it up to questions in general. So I'd like to invite Rabbi Marklloway to share his thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Reb Bracha. I feel like I can smell that scented candle. And yes, I can. It's wafting through cyberspace. I very much want to pick up on that idea. I'm thinking more about Ner Mitzvah and the idea of practice and ritual and time, which has been very sustaining for me, not just during this time, but through other times too. And I think what Jonathan said was very appropriate. I mean, we at Bonnet Shalom, we've been having all kinds of things, as we all have, on Zoom and live stream and everything else. And it's quite inspiring how many people are tuning into them. You know, we have a morning service every Tuesday and every Thursday on Zoom, and we get about 35 people to each one. And it's sort of like people are feeling that sense of rhythm and connection, which is really powerful. But again, it's not about the numbers, Rabbi Jamie, it's not about the numbers, it's about the quality of the experience. I think about that very much, the difference, you know, the book that we're in of Torah is called, in English, it's called Numbers, because it's the English name is very preoccupied with the fact that we're taking a census and counting people, but really the Hebrew is Se'u et Rosh, which means elevate, lift up the heads of each individual. And really it's about the qualitative experiences. And I think I want to speak about that of my own experience. I think what has happened to me during this time and during other times where I've felt a sense of crisis and anguish and anxiety is that rhythm of daily life sensitizes me to words that I might say every day that I don't notice on a regular day. And I've been really noticing things like our tradition asks us to wake up with a sense of gratitude. The first halacha, the first Jewish law in the famous code of law, the Shulchan Aruch, says, "Lehitkabel ka'ari la'avod et boro," like we should make ourselves strong like a lion to serve the Creator. And that idea of avodah, which is a word that can mean service, it's a word that can mean prayer, it's a word that can mean the ways in which we help other people. But then there's a whole rubric that comes, like modeh ani lefanecha, like days that I'm feeling very, very down through all of this, as I'm sure we all are. And yet the liturgy says, well, wait a minute, stop. Like there are things that I can feel deeply appreciative and grateful for. And then going through the liturgy, it's Psalm 100 that says, "Ivdu et Adonai b'simcha," serve God joyfully. Can I find ways to serve joyfully even when it might not be what I'm feeling right now? And then just noticing in a different way the fact that our traditional liturgy, one of the first things we do when we wake up in the morning is wash our hands with a bracha, with a blessing for washing our hands. The blessing which is al netilat yadayim, which is about elevation, recognizing that at a time that we are all obsessively, rightly so, washing our hands, that hand washing can actually be an act that can save a life right now. And so as I say that bracha, I think about it in that sense, as well as in the sense of actually washing off whatever physical substance might be on my hands, or God forbid, virus that might be on my hands. And then the bracha, the blessing that we traditionally say when we leave a bathroom, which is an incredible bracha, asher yatsa et adam b'chokhmah. We're talking about a source of blessing that has created the human form with great chokhmah, with great wisdom, and all these intricate channels that is in a person. And we know when so many people are sick in so many different ways, that just having basic gratitude for the ways in which our bodies function and work. And again, I've been saying that with a different kind of quality, a different type of appreciation for my own health and for my own physical well-being. And so I've been very comforted by what is there on offer as traditional daily practice. And then there's the morning blessings that take us through different mindful ways in which we wake our bodies up. I've also been thinking about the great, I mean, early on, especially when we were so aware of in this crisis of how many people couldn't breathe. And I was thinking about this relationship, you know, Reb Bracha talked about ruach and neshama, nefesh and ruach, and neshama, which is another level of soul, is really the same root as neshima, which is about breath. So I've been very mindfully focusing on breath, and the fact that breath, when we say Elohai neshama shenatata bi in the morning, you know, my God, the soul that you have breathed into me is a pure soul. This idea that breath and soul are so interconnected to each other. And so I've been really concentrating on those. I think my 5 minutes is up. I have lots more to say, but it's about daily and weekly rituals. And yes, like Reb Bracha, I've been so grateful for Shabbat, marking the time of Shabbat, marking the time of Rosh Chodesh, like this morning, saying the Psalms of Hallel, recognizing that these special bits of liturgy that mark time for us, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, and of course our cycle of holidays. So very much looking forward to the specific treats that go along with the cheesecake of Shavuot in terms of ritual and prayer and practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Mark. I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom. You can then type in your question and we will get to it in time. And then we'll also be able to answer those as they come up. We're going to open this up to the panelists. Rabbi Mark, thank you for sharing the idea and continuing that idea of daily and weekly rituals. You know, one of the things that's interesting about everything that these panelists all shared is there's some deep-rooted and spiritual practices and religious practices and weekly practices that each of them are carrying into a time like this. And what I think would be interesting is you all have this grounding, but what have you learned through this time that might be different? What's a new ritual or something that you've gathered and realized the importance of it now, even more so than before, and a way that we all can learn from you in that guidance? Rabbi Ruth?
Well, one that comes to mind might seem counterintuitive, which has been, it's a mitzvah gedola lehiot b'simcha. It's a great mitzvah to experience and express joy. And this has been a really, really difficult time with people in the hospitals, people frightened and scared, people who've passed away. And just this afternoon when we were celebrating Rosh Chodesh with the women of Har Hashem, we danced online, and I think I got about 6 emails afterwards saying, you know, I really needed that. And I wouldn't have done it unless I was with other people helping to lift my spirits. So I think that's somewhat counterintuitive now, but I found myself pushing myself a little bit to find ways of expressing and feeling joy at this time.
Rabbi Mark?
One of my almost daily ritual, I mean, I've been really enjoying the daily meditations that have been happening through the JCC, which both Rabbi Ruthie and I lead one morning a week, but those have been powerful practices. But one thing for me, and I think like many of us, we live in this amazing place where we can be outside, is integrating the physical world, my body, and ritual. And so I've been riding my bike every day to a place along by South Boulder Creek, which is running really fast right now. And I sit there and I put on my tefillin and I say my psalms and prayers and I meditate and I write. And there's just something about that integration of being in the natural world, which is such a source of strength for me. And also, like, you know, working out a little bit and having a prayer practice, bringing those all together has been really, really important for me.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share something? More Yehudis?
Well, mine is kind of more anticipatory. You know, when I first came out west and we were looking for a minyan, and a 10th person would arrive, and I would say, "Wow, you're one in a million, one in a million." But like you take it for granted, a lot of people, when you're around a lot of people and from the East Coast. But I'm kind of anticipating seeing people up front, real, three-dimensional, is like, I'm going to appreciate them much more than I have over these months, just, you know, not being able to actually see people up front. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Rabbi Jamie.
So we all know that in spiritual practice, one of the things that we talk a lot about is being present in the here and now, and not looking ahead and not looking behind, but just being right here. And this is like what we're forced to do this with COVID, right? And I'm love all the time I'm getting to hang out with my daughters. It's really been amazing. And I'm such a planner. I love making plans and designing programs for the future. And you just can't, because you don't know, right? You have no idea what's going to happen. And so this forced practice of staying right here, right now, has been really powerful for me. And the moment that I really feel it crystallizing the most, I think, has been when the occasions has arisen to say the Shehechianu. You know, we give thanks for all that sustains us for life, and for this moment right now. So that's been a really important practice for me, is just staying here.
Thank you all. And yes, Reb Bracha.
I'd quickly, I don't know exactly the mitzvah that come about from this, because I haven't reached that point in the process yet, but I did start to plant a garden, and it's the first time I've ever done that. And there's something about the stillness and being located in one place and having time to slow down and be a bit more present and let things take the time they take, that's encouraged that. And the other thing is that this slowing down has given me the occasion, or again, counterintuitively, but to sort of deepen in the Bikur Cholim, the visiting with those who aren't well, those who are struggling, even if it's just by phone. And particularly as I'm preparing to step back from Neve Kodesh, see if I can set everyone in the congregation who's a bit vulnerable up with a bigger support network than there's just me. So I've been working on that the last few weeks, hooking people up with the kinds of therapists or people with some background that might be able to support them more, and also with buddies, just trying to weave community a bit deeper in new ways now that we're in a new technological era. So that's some new practice for me.
Well, thank you all for sharing those. I think those are all actually very valuable. If people are interested in the meditation, which was mentioned a couple times here, it's available on the JCC website. If you just go to the virtual JCC, it's up there every day of the week. You can join. It's just a quick half an hour, and it goes by really quickly, and it's a really poignant and powerful moment for everyone. The next question, and then I'm actually going to open it up to our panelists to be able to actually ask each other questions, because I know they actually have a number of questions for each other. One of the things that I think we're all interested in Boulder especially, but I think across the country, is what does Jewish community look like after this time, and what are we learning during this time that can be brought forward? And some of the things I'm hearing is the power of the fact that we're having so many people connect where they wouldn't have connected previously, whether that's through prayer or other experiences, or even just the individual connections that are happening. So what I'm interested to hear is that, have you learned anything, or have you seen anything that you feel like we're going to be able to bring forward in Boulder for our community that will enhance based on what we've learned through this time? Rabbi Mark?
Am I the only one who has something to say about that? I don't know. I mean, first of all, I can't help. There was this most amazing essay on yesterday's parsha that I read that I think really addresses this, because Bamidbar, which means in wilderness, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs talks about as liminal space. And he says that in liminal space, There's where you've come from, which is isolation, and where you're going to, which is incorporation. But the moment that you're in right now is this liminal space, which he says is midbar, which is wilderness, is transformation. And being in that place, that liminal places, we absolutely have no idea we don't know. We know that we've come from one place and we're going to another place, but we have no idea what that other place is going to be like. And so on some level, I think even though we're preparing in small ways to go back to some form of gathering, like Jonathan, you mentioned the JCC's opening, we're starting to think about having just 2 or 3 people on our live streaming services, so that it's not just me on our live stream Shabbat morning and festival services. But I think that there are tremendous ways in which we've learned, but I just don't think we're going to know what that really looks like. Some people think, oh, well, you know, physical gatherings of Jewish community is a thing of the past now. We're all going to be, everyone's going to just want to be on Zoom. I absolutely don't think that's true. I think the opposite. I think that people are zoomed out. I am zoomed out, and I think people are craving to be back together. How we come back together is going to be very different. One of the things that people are saying about, certainly in the conservative movement, where we are known for having rather long, maybe too long services, is that the service is going to have to be shorter, because we can't, as long as it's contingent, we can't, it's not safe to be in a 3-hour gathering with people. So we're going to look at ways of making our services, you know, shorter, perhaps more engaging in different ways. But I do, you know, we're going to have to look at different ways in how we eat together. We may just be in a situation where we're gathering outside and people bring their own food. I don't think we can be serving communal meals for quite a while, things like that. So I think there's 2 parts to that answer then. I think part of it is just, for now, we just have to remain in this liminal space and not quite know what we're going to next, but knowing that in the liminal space, we're learning tremendous things. I think that we will carry forward, and the community is not going to look like it did before, but what it actually looks like, I don't know.
Thank you, Rabbi Mark. We're going to go to Rabbi Ruthie, and then we'll go to Moria Hudis.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, somewhat facetiously but happily, to my colleague Rabbi Mark, that the Reform movement back in the late 1800s thought that the services were running a little bit long, and that's why we truncated them somewhat. That said, I think one thing that we've been learning from this, or having not just learning, but relearning, is just how many of us are actually vulnerable. And that vulnerability has always been there, but I think we've been sort of blind to it sometimes. And during this pandemic, I know at Har Hashem that we've really made very big efforts to reach out and to care and check in and to be there for one another in a way that I feel is much deeper than how we have been typically. And so I really hope that that's something that we will continue to do after this is done, is to check in on our elders, our vulnerable, and not only to do that, but also to recognize the importance of relationships and sustaining them and helping to make that possible in our community. I think another thing that this period has done is it's also made us aware that we have access to the best Jewish minds in the world all the time now. And I know for myself, I've been enjoying watching an Israeli poetry class during the week through Rachel Korzin from Jerusalem. Some of us have watched Aviva Zornberg or Pardes lectures. And so I think that's something also that I think will be very strong after this is done, that we have access and people are more comfortable accessing teachers and teachings from around the world and country.
Thank you very much. Moria Hudis?
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar to what Ruthie and Sarah Bracha was saying, that we've been exposed to people who were, you know, otherwise probably unable to come to either live services or JCC events, and they're so grateful to be able to, you know, connect on a Zoom level. So I think even when things get back to full scale, I think that opportunity of having that kind of, you know, bringing people together and reaching out to them through Zoom is an invaluable service that shouldn't be cast aside, even when life gets back to kind of normal. So that's. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Reb Bracha, did you have something?
Sure. I mean, just to state the obvious, we've all gotten a little bit better at, leading worship by Zoom, which isn't something that I think most of us ever gave much thought to, how to do a live stream service or how to do an interactive service over the internet. But I think this is an incredible opportunity. Right now, the congregation I've been serving, we have just been live streaming high holidays and not making a regular practice of it. But there are so many Jews who live in isolated areas already, isolated from Jewish community, who are so desperately in need of internet-based Judaism. I think this has given us a good zest to start to develop that a bit more. And similarly, I've seen incredible things with our Hebrew school, really rethinking what does it look like to do Jewish education, and using it as an opportunity to involve parents much more closely in the education of their child, because you've only got one teacher and all the children are in different rooms. So you're having to bring in the parents to be active educators and facilitators. And I've seen that doing amazing things already. So I think this has actually begun to give us the seeds for some really, really wonderful, we're in this postmodern, post-denominational, post-synagogue kind of era, and this is giving us a push to get more deeply into that quicker.
Thank you very much. There was actually a great comment that came through during this time about the idea of we're in this new and challenging wilderness and need to craft a new Mishkan together. Any thoughts about what about that, and some historical context and context for our listeners here? Rabbi Mark, did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, I think it touches on what Rabbi Ruthie was sharing at the beginning about the evolution of Torah and the evolution of the people. I mean, a Mishkan, those of you not familiar, the word is the tabernacle that the Israelites constructed, and it was built in the desert. So that midbar, that liminal wilderness experience, there was a space created for God's presence to be. And so we definitely are redefining where we can bring that presence into space. And I think absolutely, like Rebecca said, I mean, some of it will for sure continue to be in online forums. For sure, we will absolutely continue to reach people who are not able to get into physical space. And so I think the Mishkan, in some ways, it becomes smaller, because I think many of our circles have become smaller in terms of the people we're actually physically seeing. We're in our small little neighborhood pods or whatever we're in. And as we come back to community, I think we're going to probably, have just a minyan, or, just 10 people, maybe 20 people. So there'll be a small inner space of people who'll be self-selecting and signing up and all of that stuff. But then there'll be a wider outside space. So the Mishkan will have like a circle on the inside who are physically present with each other, and a circle on the outside that'll be connecting to us, through Zoom or live stream or whatever. So I think it's a very interesting Mishkan. I mean, in the Parsha yesterday, we read about all the different formations of the different tribes, and they will like basically form a circle around this space in the middle, And so I sort of see some version of that. The way we gather is different, but it still powerfully creates Mishkan, which is like sacred space, just different kind of sacred space.
Thank you. Reb Bracha, did you have something to add?
Sure, yeah. And the Mishkan, I think, is inherently this sort of liminal space. It's interdimensional, which is what allows the divine presence to rest there. To me, that is an amazing, has an amazing overlap or holographic resonance with the internet itself, which is similarly not actually located in space-time as we know it. Hence, we can be talking to someone on the other side of the world where it's not even the same day. We are literally operating outside of space and time through the internet. And the other thing, which I think is really beautifully reflected here, which when we learn about the Mishkan originally, what we hear is it's created from the collective offerings of everyone whose heart so moves them brings gifts, and that creates this sort of treasure trove in the center, the sanctuary that we can all draw energy from. And I think what we're doing here today as Chaver, and in fact year-round as Chaver, is a really, really beautiful example of that, of how all of the communities and all of the congregations and all of the leadership are bringing their gifts together to weave this portable interdimensional space-time sanctuary, which is the resource from which we can all draw.
Thank you, Rabbi Ruthie, and then Mori Yehudis.
Yeah, I wanted to add that it's important that we also recognize that after we left Egypt, and before we got to the promised land, we spent a lot of time wandering and not knowing exactly where we were going. And that is a very frightening, uncomfortable place. And I think we're all actually in that same place right now. And I also believe that one of the ways we get through that is by being together as a community and supporting and nurturing and touching base with one another. And I think that's another part of it that I wanted just to raise up.
Thank you, Mori Yehudis.
Well, since you asked the question, my obvious response was the JCC can be even bigger in Mishkan than it has been till now. The Mishkan had animals there. It had plants because the well of water produced gardens. So my hope and prayer is that the JCC become even a greater center of Jewish life for people who otherwise had no contact, but now perhaps during this time their soul has been awakened and they're craving connection. So.
Thank you. I carry that weight every day. So, I wanted to open it up for each of our panelists to be able to.
Amy put a very interesting question to
great.
the panelists there, which I don't know if I think it's worth commenting on that a little bit.
Yeah, I see it here. All right. The question from Amy is, I'm wondering about how, if the current changes might lead to more service or gatherings, such as this one, where service leaders from different denominations come together to lead services or programming for the entire community, even across geographical boundaries, how that might come to be in this new time after, or even during this time.
I think absolutely, and I've already experienced some of it. We've been doing joint Kabbalat Shabbats with Rodef Shalom in Denver, so we got two communities, one in Boulder and one in Denver, and we're joining together for services. And there are other communities around the country where we're sort of talking about collaborating in that way. As we all have been, able to come on a Friday morning, join Kabbalat Shabbat with my synagogue in London, and I think more of that can and should happen, both within our denominations and also across our denominations. I would love to explore that with Chaver. I think it's a great question for Chaver to explore what we can offer as a group of, across as a community-wide experiences. I think which is the intent of the question. Let's not just do this once a year on Shavuot. Let's look at ways that we can once in a while have something where we're all participating in different ways and lead people through meaningful experiences, maybe hosted through the JCC.
Always happy to host. Reb Bracha?
I agree, the JCC is an amazing way to form a central place for us all to teach and stream from. And I also want to say, I think given the sort of different halachic boundaries and constraints that different denominations face when it comes to technology, use of technology on Shabbat and our festivals, this is an amazing opportunity for us to up-level our weekday teachings, internet-based teachings and offerings, because that's the time where we can all come together and it's a lot less complicated. So perhaps one thing we could aim for, maybe just throwing it out there now, is thinking about doing Rosh Chodesh as a whole congregation, because more often than not, there's a day of Rosh Chodesh each month, which isn't a Shabbat. And yeah, just a thought, let's think about weekday practice and how we can help the Jewish community do more day by day, not just Shabbat and holidays.
One of the incredible things about the Boulder community, and this has been the case during my entire time here, is that we've always come together across denominations. We've always come together as a community leadership. There's different ways that we've done that. Rabbi Ruthie mentioned, Yom HaShoah and Shavuot and other things, but we also have monthly meetings with all the Jewish communal leaders. We have ways in which Chaver connects every single month to make sure that they're meeting. We're in a really blessed way set up to be able to capitalize on that piece even further through this time, which makes doing a panel like this really easy. it's one text message because we all are in communication with each other. So to be able to level up from this is going to be a pretty incredible thing, and see where that can go. I now want to move to some of the questions that I know our panelists have questions for each other about the ways in which, just to remind everyone that the concept of what we're looking at is the way in which the Torah has provided light for our panelists during challenging times. And so what questions do each of you have for each other that could enlighten all of us in the community? Rabbi Jamie?
So I have a question with which I would like help. So I have lots of fears in this time, but one of them that I notice is that kids are losing their sense of hope. So as more and more disappointments come and more things are canceled, I find myself not even wanting to tell my children when something's canceled because I'm so fearful it's going to devastate them. And it doesn't devastate them at all because they didn't expect it to happen. They have no hope that it would happen. They assumed that it wouldn't happen. And these are kids that have grown up with school shootings. They're terrified about climate change and the kind of world we're giving them. And now they're facing this where all their coping, their friends have been taken away in some ways. There's so many things that have been taken away from them and such huge disappointments. And my question is, how are we gonna, hatikva, right? Hope. How are we gonna restore hope in our youth?
A wise teacher of mine once said, hope is more or less irrelevant because it's based on a particular outcome, wanting a particular outcome. What's unchangingly useful is compassion.
Powerful statement right there.
And comfort. I agree totally with that statement. I think it's, hope, if I don't think our job as leaders is to offer magical thinking and just, hope can be magical thinking, like everything's going to be great. The world's different. It's going to be different. But we can help in the same way that some of us have shared about rituals and practices and texts that have helped sustain us. We can find ways, I hope we can find ways to make them relevant for younger people too, to have sort of, ways that we can offer meaning and connection and comfort rather than just pure kind of hope, I remember when I was living in Jerusalem and there was the Moment Cafe was blown up by a suicide bomb, and and it was right around the corner from the yeshiva where I was studying, and the morning after that happened, and there were like 30 something people died in that, and we went down there and we chanted Psalms, and it was like we were all feeling so scared and hopeless and afraid and all of it, and there was something about just this is what we do. We study Torah and we chant Psalms, and just having kind of the structures of our tradition. I don't know if that's an answer, but it's a really, really important question, Jamie.
Well, there's also
I just want to add a piece that was just shared, and then Rabbi Jamie, I'll come back to you. Rabbi Green, who's actually not on the panel today, but just shared this statement. I believe hope is critical for us. I think hope is a conviction. We have to train to use hope. It isn't just wishing for something. I think hope is how we see the world, and that is the lens through which I see the world. I can't live without hope, and I won't let COVID-19 rob me of it. Rob me of the outlook that will impact my behavior to do good. So just an added piece. Rabbi Jamie, I'll go back to you.
So I just what all of you have said, it makes me think of the people that worked on the founding of Israel, right? And bringing back the Hebrew as a spoken language. Like all these things were impossible. They were absolutely impossible things. And what made them possible was hope, right? They dreamed it and they worked on it. And so maybe it is developing the practice. Maybe it's looking more into characters like that who were such great role models and seeing how did they do it? How did they sustain themselves when it seemed impossible?
More Yehudis?
Yeah, my responses would be to kind of, have discussions or make lists of all the things that your kids are grateful for in their life that they have and that maybe other kids don't have. And also times in their lives when it did seem hopeless in the past, but somehow they got through it in a really strong way. And that same kind of momentum can continue into the future.
Rabbi Ruthie, and then Bracha.
In addition to hope, I wanted to add the element of emunah, of faith, which is also an orientation that we can build that muscle of tikva and of emunah. And I think to build on what Rabbi Green said, it is a practice that we train ourselves in. And I forgot which one of my colleagues mentioned Viktor Frankl. Maybe it was Sarah Bracha, but we don't always have control over what life presents us with. But we do have some element of agency regarding how we respond to it. We don't have full control, and this is teaching us that we do not have control over a lot of what happens in our lives, yet we can have agency over how we respond to it. And I think one of the things I know for me that really gives hope or helps build that faith is how I connect to other people and what I do to help other people. And that can also affect the lens with which I experience my life and the world around me. And to also echo, though, what Rabbi Mark said, is that we don't want to present a world that isn't the world we're living in. Judaism is not about some fake sense of what the world is, but rather how we can orient ourselves to what it is, but to do that with hope, tikva, and emunah, faith, that there will be a better tomorrow. And that's, as Jews, we've always lived with that understanding.
Thank you, Bracha.
I'll add a couple of axioms that I think are really relevant here, especially for the younger generation. Rabbi Jamie, you shared before beautifully the Midrash about God saying to Adam, don't destroy or poison my world, because if you do, there'll be no one to come after you to clean it up. But alongside that, I think very important is Rabbi Nachman's principle that says, if you believe you can break, believe you can fix. And for the young people of today to understand that just because the older generations have messed things up pretty badly doesn't actually mean that there's nothing that can be fixed or they're not the people that can fix it. And to go along with that, I want to share an axiom from NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is that everything is possible, anything is possible if broken down into small enough chunks. So to be really specific about what it is exactly that you want to do, and then what are the stages that you need to go through to get there, be very practical and grounded. And I also was going to say something about emunah, about faith. But for me, I think it's less about the fact faith in a future that's better, and more faith that exactly how things are right now is exactly how they're supposed to be, which we may not understand or be able to perceive or comprehend. It may not seem that way, but faith is the belief that everything is in fact perfect, even though it contains suffering. And from this, I think, is, as you were saying before, Rabbi Ruthie, the incredibly important principle, to let that cultivate joy as a foundational state, this rejoicing that things are exactly as they're supposed to be. And as you were saying, Mari Yehudis, that it's really on the teacher's watch, and the teacher will ultimately take responsibility. Everything is just fine.
Thank you for sharing. One of the interesting things about the way in which we've been training our children is we've been training them based on 21st century skills. This is a big thing, and resilience and grit and those pieces are big parts of this. So it's interesting to see how children are actually adapting right now, and how some of those skills that we've been trying to teach may be actually coming into play at a time like this. I want to let everyone know we got about 10 more minutes for questions. and allow any questions that are coming up from the community. And also, if any other panelists have any other questions for each other. Thank you, Rabbi Jamie, for sharing that, that question with us. If not, I have another question for you, no problem. My question, actually going back to what Rabbi Jamie was talking about, was this tension between the two different atoms and that experience. And I wonder how each of you have had that tension sort of sitting with you during this time, and what tools and things from your past you've actually brought in to be able to think about it and moving forward.
Could you say that again? Sorry, I didn't quite.
No problem. No problem. Basically, thinking about the two different stories of Adam, and looking at how one was sort of given the tools to succeed, and the other needed to be able to have to create those tools. And so, how are you dealing with those two pieces during this time of you've been given a lot of the tools, or you've learned a lot of these tools? It's very clear every single one of you in this panel has had incredible experience that you brought into this time. There's also this creative side of what is new and what is coming up for you now that you're bringing forward. Rabbi Mark.
I mean, I really like the way Rabbi Jamie framed that famous teaching from Rabbi Soloveitchik, and I just think that, no relation, by the way, even though they have the same name etymology, but I think I was, when this first happened, and I think many of us would totally went into Adam 1 mode. I thought I had to like create programming every single day and do everything, and was the metrics like how many people have been on the Zoom calls and how many people are doing that, how many people, you know, and it became an obsessive thing. And then it was like I was constantly judging myself and I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough, we're not doing enough, we need to really be there for each other, how can we be there for each other? And it can be relentless. And then I think the creativity and the flow and the self-acceptance and the surrender is how I see that. The Adam 2 is just saying, you know what, I'm doing what I can do right now, and it's enough, and it has to be enough. And the people who are tuning in are having the experience that they're having. We're never going to reach everybody. We're never going to engage with everybody. Some people are just never going to get onto Zoom ever, and that's okay. And we need to just accept that and be grateful for who we have been able to touch through it all. And I think that constant, that's the tension for me in that obsessive, and rabbis, we can be so, and I'm sure same with you, Jonathan, it can become this obsessive kind of, I have to do more, I have to do more, I have to do more, that like how Rabbi Jamie framed it, like the CEO mentality, you know, it's numbers, 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 bottom line, bottom line, bottom line, you know, how many people are tuning in, and just being willing to just let go of all of that and just surrender and say, you know what, we're doing the best we can. This is a really unprecedented time. None of us have lived through a global pandemic before. Like, we're doing what we can, and we're taking it day by day, and that's what we can do, is do our best. That's how I had to kind of frame it for myself.
Maury Yehudis?
Yeah, I keep coming back to the idea of the serenity prayer, to control what we can, the courage to change what we can, the serenity to accept what we can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I think, you know, just like one crazy small example, like, you know, people had this run on toilet paper because they didn't have the emunah that somehow, if you had enough for a little while, it would be there. And I had a crazy thing that happened. My next door neighbor, who never speaks to me, and she brought me, I ran out of paper towels, and she brought me some paper towels. All of a sudden she said, my son brought me some paper towels, would you like some? And then the next week, somebody else brought me toilet paper, but by mistake it brought it to my neighbor, so she thought I was returning it to her. And like, these things set up, you know, leave space for kind of magic to happen when you can't control things. So.
Rabbi Ruthie?
On the topic of toilet paper, I think the pandemic has also given me new insights. And so I actually bought a bidet, which I now realize is better for our planet because I don't have to use lots and lots of toilet paper. And I think the pandemic in some way has put a lot of things in a relief. And what I mean by that is I've suddenly learned that a lot of introverts are actually quite happy now and are saying, you know, this has been a time where for me, you know, I'm very comfortable, even though all the extroverts are less comfortable. And I think in the same relief, it's sort of shown, I think, that we really need to come back to our basic spiritual practices, whether that's prayer or meditation and being in community, and that those of us who don't have those spiritual foundations as our bedrock, when something like this happens, it really takes us for an even greater hitting of the waves. And perhaps that's a wonderful learning that we can deepen those roots for people and have them, you know, start to see that a little bit. So, you know, missing of toilet paper can also lead to great shifts, like the buying of bidets and helping our planet.
Thank you for sharing that. I have one final question for all of you. And it goes a little bit more into that, that spiritual side. So in times like this, in your experience, even previously, do you turn to God? Do you turn to prayer? Do you turn to faith? Do you turn to Torah? What's really driving you in times of difficulty that you're going to, that you can share with each of us to learn from? You can start us off, Rabbi Ruthie.
When I was a little girl, I was terrified when it was time to have my bat mitzvah. And my father of blessed memory said, there's been 5,000 years of Jews having bar and bat mitzvahs, maybe a bat mitzvah. What things makes you think you're going to be the first one to totally screw it up? You'll be fine. And so that actually made me feel better. And I think I gain a lot of strength from learning about and from the stories of our people, whether in the Bible, the Torah, or other places, and how they were able to make it through difficult times and what lessons they learned. And I try to learn from their wisdom.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rabbi Jamie?
So I'm torn between two things. So one really sustaining thing for me has been my girls, who are just remarkable people. And I have so much more time with them now and have really been able to focus on creating great memories for them and beautiful moments and just being there with each other. So that's one thing. But my personal practice is, of course, very linked to the outdoors. And like Rabbi Mark said, you know, I make sure that almost every day I tend to ride my bike up Flagstaff a lot because I really like that ride. But the flowers have just been sensational on that trail, and the red rocks have been amazing. And so just hiking or biking and just being out there, I find like all those Abraham, Joshua, Heschel moments of like you right now, you come over a rise and all of a sudden like the grass is so green and the yellow flowers are so yellow and the rocks are so red. And it's phenomenal. And in the beginning of, and it takes me right into the moment again, which is really important to me. And in the beginning of this whole thing, I posted something on Instagram where I hiked up to one of my favorite spots, and it was covered in clouds, so you couldn't see the rocks. And I did this little silly video just about how, even though we all know that even though we can't see the rocks because of the clouds, they're still there. And this is a really strange time we are going through. And we will eventually get to the other side, and the metaphorical rocks will still be there. So there's all these spiritual lessons out in nature that have just been like so sustaining for me. And I hope that they have been for all of you too.
Thank you. Mori Yehudis?
So for me personally, some of you know, studying Torah is my addiction. And when I would be able to go outside, sometimes I don't have time to study today, but like now I can take a little bit here and there, and it's amazing. If I have something on my mind, I'll open a book at random sometimes. I have enough to do that, and the answer will come to me, and I get so high from that. So even though I'm living alone, I'm surrounded by my own personal forest that has been transformed into ideas of teaching to sustain me. So
Thank you, Mori Yehudis. Rabbi Mark?
Animals, I mean, I totally agree with everything that Rabbi Jamie said. Being outside every day has been vital for me. Biking, hiking, walking, whatever, but also just, you know, I'm part of the, as others on the panel are, the goat co-op. This morning I was out milking the goats and taking care of the mothers and the new babies, and there's something about being around animals and new life that is really incredibly enriching and powerful and hopeful, actually. You see these newborn, and my neighbors across the street, a cat just had a litter of 5 kittens, and just going and hanging out with the kittens and taking their dog for a walk. They're away right now, so I'm taking care of their chickens and their cats and their dogs and all of it. And just so twice a day, every day, going and hanging out with those animals and being with the goats. There's something about that, as well as being on the trail, like Rabbi Jamie is saying. Something about being around life in an animal world that doesn't know from COVID-19, you know, that's been really sustaining.
Thank you. Reb Bracha, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'm about to go on sabbatical, so I'm going to be deepening in practice in the next few months. You can ask me in a few months what it looks like. But I want to say one more thing about this image you asked about of you know, Adam 1 and Adam 2. And for me, we're in such an incredible moment of Adam 2 consciousness right now, because it's clearer than ever that we're in well, to me it's clear that we're in an integrative, iterative feedback loop with existence. And it seems to me logical to say, although I know it's actually spiritual speculation, logically, spiritually speculative to say that the planet has called for this great slowdown, has created the conditions that are causing us to consume far less, burn far less fossil fuels, travel far less, etc., and shift our mode of being and reevaluate all the things that we need and the structures that we need in our society to support one another and support the most vulnerable. This, to me, more than anything, is like that Adam 2 image of we're there as co-creators with Hashem. And Hashem is still right here as co-creators with us, operating through the planet and its wisdom, the planet's intelligence, in pointing the way for us in new directions, in a new era.
Well, thank you very much. That was a poignant end to an incredible, diverse array of opinions and thoughts about what has driven our panelists and our spiritual leaders and rabbis in this community during this time, and what has sustained them. If anyone's here interested in more programming around Shavuot, all of the Haver rabbis have pre-recorded short teachings, and they're posted on the Boulder Haver YouTube channel. Topics are for adults and children and range from Sinai moments and personal connections to a story, a Shavuot story for young children, as well as how to make cheesecake and more. So check those out.